Win at the board game night yesterday? Nobody won. Everybody lost. Ah, that's sad. Um, so before we get started, I would like to say two things. One is the slide, if the AV crew can put this online, yes, is this year we did, or the last 3 years, we did Drupal Developer Days in Belgium. Well, actually only 1 year, but it took 3 years. And there is a question then, obviously, as this is an all-volunteer event, where should or would or could we do Drupal Developer Days next year? I don't have the answer, so there's no second slide as in it's gonna be that year. This is not DrupalCon. But I spoke to some people that are interested in either hosting or have questions. So if you're interested, fill in this form. It doesn't have to be complete. Maybe it could be Slovenia, could be France, could be maybe the Netherlands. If you have any questions about that, ask me. Happy to tell you all about all that experience. And maybe one key benefit, but we still have to see what the profit says. But there's always like a small amount from this edition that actually goes to the next edition. So for example, from Drupal Developer Days in Romania, we got some parts of the profit to get kickstarted here as well. And then the second thing I wanted to ask is for all the volunteers that helped with this event to maybe just stand up. Like, yeah, now, yes. And I would like to ask you to give them like a massive applause. As I said, this is an all-volunteer event. There's no profit at all to any person other than the professional crew that we recruited in that sense. So the AV crew as well. Thank you for that. More about that in the closing session. Now, our keynote speaker. This is Bram Duvigneau, coming from the Netherlands. Is that correct, Bram? Yes. And as you can see, or maybe not see, because that's the tricky thing here, Bram is completely blind. He doesn't see you. He will explain that, I think, in a bit. That's where his dog is, his guidance dog here at the piano. So please welcome Bram and give him a great applause. And thank you for coming here, Bram.
Yep. Hello. Yes. Right. There we go. Is the presentation full screen? Yep. Thanks. I just before we get started, we are talking. I was talking with the AV crew to set things up, and I went like, yeah, I once did a presentation, and after 10 minutes, I mentioned the slides, and someone said, yeah, we haven't seen any slides for 10 minutes. Just tell me if there's something wrong, please, because I can't see it either. So, what's this all about? I'm going to talk about accessibility. The title of the talk is Drupal, the accessible CMS for accessible websites. What that means, you will find out in the next 50 minutes or so. Nick already introduced me, but let me tell me very shortly a bit of my background. As Nick said, I'm totally blind. A long time ago, I studied computer science. Then I became a backend developer, and it happens to I happened to find some accessibility work on my way, and that's what I do now full time. I have a company called Firmground in the Netherlands, and we do accessibility consulting, and we help developers make stuff accessible, testing, etc. The plan was to do this talk with Roel van Gils. Unfortunately, Roel couldn't make it, so I'm trying to be two persons in one here. So Roel van Gils is your local accessibility hero here in Ghent. He also does the same work that I do, but then here in Ghent. So let me see. Yes, it works. What's this all about? I first would like to introduce the concept of accessibility to you. So just explain a bit what is accessibility, for who are we making stuff accessible and why. Then I would like to talk about accessible content management systems. What makes a CMS accessible? Is it important to have an accessible CMS? And of course, the quite relevant next question: is Drupal accessible? Well, we will find out. And then I will explain some of Drupal's core accessibility features and do a quick demo of them. So let's get started. First of all, who in this audience ever got a request to build an accessible website? Please raise your hands. Okay, first lesson of this talk, if you raise your hand, I can't see it. So just give me a shout. Who? Yeah. Oh, I think I can skip the accessibility introduction then, right? No, I won't skip it, but feel free to doze off. That's the wind, yeah. So that's more people than I would expect. That's great to hear. So what is accessibility? Accessibility is making stuff not usable, because usable is a really broad thing. If it's usable, you would think, oh, it's nice, it's fine, it's good to use, it's a pleasure to use the website or the thing you have built. Accessibility is kind of the bare minimum of usability. It's okay. It can be used by a certain specific set of people with certain characteristics. So usually we call that the user. So who is that user anyway? And so who benefits when you make stuff accessible? Let's see. First of all, well, if we talk about accessibility, we think like people with disabilities, people with special needs, but we also have smartphone users, and I wouldn't say that smartphone users have a disability, but it's a smartphone is kind of the root cause for some difficult situations where you have small screens, you have to optimize for maybe slow connection speeds and bad lighting and all kinds of stuff. So just to get started, always remember that probably half of your user base might be on a smartphone. In developing countries, it's often more than that, but even from recent statistics, if you are in the United States, there's like 48% of your users will be mobile, usually. It depends on the website and the activity you have built, of course, but let's say that you could suspect that half of your user base is mobile. So that's not the ideal situation, right? You build your website for people like you, sitting in an office, well lit, dual big screen, monitor setup, right? But that's for half of you. That's at least that's not true. Then we have another problem. That's that people really overrate their digital skills, and we overrate the digital skills of other people. Well, what do I mean by digital skills? It's a term coined by in a book by Sander van Deurzen. It's a Dutch academic researcher, and he wrote a whole big book about this. And it's very interesting because he says, okay, we expect like the younger generation that has grown up with the internet to be very good at digital skills, and he did research and it seems that's totally wrong. We overestimate that. Why? Because people are pretty good in doing certain tasks, say scrolling through TikTok, but they are not good at understanding what they are doing. Understanding, okay, if I put a search in a search engine, what do I get? Do I get neutral search results, or do I get specific search results based on my history, or do I get search results that are fact checked? Or people usually don't really know how stuff under the hood works and what they're doing. So is it important? Yes, it is, because we expect users to be much more capable than they might be. And Sander called this digital inequality. I think that's a nice term for it. So there's a big, a big range of digital skills, and even if you're building something for a group where you might expect a high level of digital skills, that's not certainly true. You can't really expect that anymore. Um, so this is more what you might think of the classical thing. If I'm talking accessibility, it may be that your user has a motor disability. Well, what does that mean? That means that he or she can't use part of their bodies, right? So using a mouse might be impossible, using a touchscreen. So many people use either a keyboard to browse, or something that emulates a keyboard. For example, if I would use what's called a switch, then I would have one or two buttons, or maybe even foot pedals, or other inputs that I can activate. Some people even use a switch that they activate by moving their head, because that's all they can move, and that usually simulates keyboard input. So optimizing for keyboard is very important for this group as well. So yeah, that might be part of your user base. Also, of course, maybe a user might be blind, such as me. What you see on the slide is called a refreshable braille display. I also have one here in front of me, but I don't think you can see it in the audience. I can lift it up a bit and try to not pull cables. A braille display is a mechanical device that has lots of small braille dots, and we call it braille cells. And braille cell has 8 dots, and we can form patterns with it. So every character fits in 1, sometimes 2 braille cells, right? So this one only has 40 braille cells, so I can read 40 characters at most at a time. And at home or at the office I have a larger one, but that's not really portable. So that's not the only way I access information. I also listen to text, what's called text-to-speech. And the software that's used for it is called a Screenreader, and the Screenreader translates everything that's on screen to speech output and braille output. And we will see a demo of that later on. So I sneakily have one Bluetooth ear under this headset, and so in my ear I hear my own slides being read back to me when I navigate them, and I can check them in braille as well. So let's see. It also could be that your user is not totally blind, but what we call visually impaired. Those users see, but they might either have very low vision, so they don't see much, or they could have special cases where you might see with one eye, or just a part of your eye, or only in one certain spot. So you can only focus on one certain spot. So usually those users use either browser zoom to zoom in their website and read it better, or if you have a severe case of low vision, you would use special magnification software. And the magnification software just can zoom up to, like, say, 20, 30 times. So that's a lot. So imagine if you zoom 20 or 30 times, you only see a very, very small part of your viewport, right? So you have to scroll a lot, and you get a really really small part of the whole thing. So it's hard to get an overview of what's going on. And there are also low vision users that might use color or contrast filters. So they might swap colors, or they might just increase contrast by applying filters so they can read it better. So there's a whole broad group. It could also be that English is not the native or the mother language of your user. I think I say English here, but I mean the language you expect as a primary language for the user. And you see here a picture of sign language, and that's not a fault. Sign language is a language, and sign language could even be your native language. So if you're born deaf, and sign language is the first language you learn, that will be your native language. So every language to you is secondary. even the what we in the rest of the country that this person is born in would call the native language. So that brings me automatically to the next slide. Maybe your user is deaf. For example, if you provide a form and you ask for a phone number, and a deaf user has to fill this in, it's a required field. That's not nice, because if you get a call and you're deaf, you can't really do that call, and you would need a translator or interpreter to do it right. And of course, you don't have one standby 24/7. So yeah, we laugh about it, and that's fine. But one case was, I remember clearly. I was working on COVID forms, like if you would travel into the Netherlands and you had to go in quarantine, and you had to fill in a form and say where you were staying, and you had to check a box that says uh, I I say that I will be staying indoor all day here, and people may check it and may call me to ask if I'm still there. We had a problem with that, because if you would call someone who is deaf and you ask, "Are you still there?" and he is not able to answer, that would make him a suspect immediately. So you don't want that. So also a big part of user base deaf people. Um, well, this one might be pretty obvious, but maybe your user needs good contrast. What do I mean with that? If you have if you have low vision, you might need good contrast, and you might have your special color and contrast filters and such. But there are also other situations where you might want to check something, and you need good contrast, such as outside in the sun on your phone, or if you're doing something else and you just don't have the optimal environment and you don't have good lighting, high contrast helps a lot. So that's not just for low vision users, but also for a much broader user base than you might think. Well, that brings me to color blindness. If your user is colorblind, and there are a few types of color blindness, so it's not that all people who are colorblind have trouble with the same colors, right? So there is a real chance that someone will not spot the color you have used or the color combination you've used. So don't use only color to indicate things. For example, if you have a chart and you draw 2-3 different lines, either you give them a different color, that's fine, but also give them a different like shape or pattern, so dots or just other kind of lines, thick lines, thin lines. So color is fine. Don't stop using color, but not color alone, because that's hard to see for people who have issues with color blindness. And they're getting numbers of these kind of disabilities is pretty hard, but it's suspected that one in, I think, from the top of my head, one in 12 women are colorblind, and 1 in 4 or 5 men are colorblind. That's weird. I don't know why. But as I said, getting this statistics is hard, because everyone who might be colorblind doesn't go somewhere and registers himself. Yes, I'm colorblind. So it's hard to get the numbers on this. And maybe we all have a disability sooner or later. And that sounds a bit drastic, but I mean, if you have a disability that might be permanent. For example, I would say that my lack of vision is probably permanent. I don't expect that it will change anytime soon. But you can also have a temporary disability where you might be on a train and you want to watch a movie, but you don't have something some headphones or something to listen to it. So if the movie has subtitles, you can follow it, or if you want to annoy your other passengers, you can just turn the volume up, but that's not nice. So in that case, subtitles could be added for specifically for people who are deaf, but in this case, you have temporary disability. You are on the train, you can't listen. You have to read them as well, right? So maybe disability wouldn't be the right word, but that's what we usually use. But I think everyone sooner or later will have some kind of disability. Um, let's see. Hmm, I'm getting thirsty. So now we have discussed why you would put in the effort of making stuff accessible, right? So you have a really diverse user base, and you just like you don't know where your website will be running on the internet, right? I can view it on a computer, on a smartphone, on a tablet, probably on a TV or on a game console. You don't know, and it's the same with your user base. You don't know who is going to visit your website. So an accessible website is important, but the thing that we don't discuss that often is that I think an accessible CMS is important as well. I will go into why and how a bit later. Mm, so let's start with when is a CMS accessible? Strictly speaking, there are two guidelines. One that you might be familiar with is we call it WCAG. That's WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And if you ever have been asked to build an accessible website, probably your client said, "I want something that's WCAG compliant." What that means is that you have to comply with that set of guidelines, and by now it's also required for, say, government websites, public websites in Europe to comply with this. But there's another set of guidelines that's called ATAG. That is the Authoring Tools Accessibility Guidelines. What's in the name? So the Authoring Tools Accessibility Guidelines are specifically written for authoring tools like CMSs, or probably back in the days desktop software like Dreamweaver, but I don't think we call it authoring tools today. But those guidelines state two things. You should be able to create accessible content, and you should be able to create it in an accessible way. So the interface itself of the authoring tool should be accessible. So in practice, I would say a CMS could be accessible whenever it can create accessible content, regardless of their disability or their other needs. So that means that you just not only create accessible content, so the content you create is WCAG compliant, but also that the interface that you use to do that is also accessible for everyone. So why would we care? Why do we need accessible CMSs? But let's be honest, it's more work than not doing it, right? Well, there are a few, I think, good reasons. I think if you have an accessible CMS that creates job opportunities for people with disabilities or people with special needs. So, for example, if I would say I'm blind, what I am, and I would not be in software development, but I would, for example, have a career in content management, or be a text writer, and if I would apply for a job and they would be using an inaccessible CMS, and part of my job would be to put stuff on the website, I would have a problem, right? I couldn't really do that job. So what's the easy way? Not hire me, or rewrite your CMS. I think that not hiring me is the easy way out for the company in this case, right? So I think that is not overstated that if you ensure that your CMS is accessible, that you're really creating jobs or job opportunities for people. And the other side of the story is that who uses a CMS these days? What do we consider being a content creator? I think in the old days you had your visitors and you had your content creators, and there was a very strict line between them. But these days you have user-generated content. You have sites where users can probably create their own articles or their own websites even, or their own sections of your website. So I think the lines between what's a normal visitor and what's a content producer are really blurring right now. So I think also with that in mind, it's important to ensure CMSs are accessible. So what about Drupal? Because after all, this is a Drupal conference, right? So let's talk about Drupal. First, the good news: Drupal is accessible. At least Drupal core is accessible. Drupal core tries to be compliant with WCAG 2.0 is the official statement, and ATEC 2.0. We are currently at WCAG 2.1, and 2.2 will be out soon. But most new stuff in 2.1 and or at least 2.1 to 2.2, I'm not sure from the top of my head, but 2.1 had many new guidelines for mobile optimizations. And I've searched for issues, and there were already some issues open to get Drupal in line with WCAG 2.1. So I think that's a matter of time. At least people are working on it. By the way, this will be a pattern we will see more today, where I try to search what Drupal is doing, and I don't have to report an issue because it's already open. That's cool. So core tries to be compliant with WCAG, but also with ATEC. So that means that core tries to be to provide an accessible interface for your content editing. And accessibility is also a requirement in Drupal land. That's called a gate, quality gate, to get something into core. So that means that if you want to do something in Drupal core, there are a number of gates to pass. So you have to pass the accessibility gate as well. That means that that you have to check if your contribution is accessible. I think that's a great thing. But accessibility is a process. It's not just oh, let's make this accessible and then we are done and we don't have to look at it again, right? It's a process, and it's not just a technical problem. So it's not just following a checklist and say, oh yeah, we are now WCAG compliant, we're done. No. To be really accessible, you really have to collaborate with your site as a site builder, with your content people. Make sure the right instructions are in place. Make sure that everyone knows a bit about accessibility and why it's important and what we're doing about it. And even if you have an accessible base like Drupal core, you could easily make it inaccessible by adding certain plugins or specific themes. So if you are customizing Drupal, please also think a bit about, am I introducing accessibility issues, and is that a problem on this project? So I think even if you are asked to build an accessible website, a WCAG compliant website, even then it's usually not the CMS part is usually not part of that requirement. And I think it's a good thing to at least keep it in mind when building CMSs. So let's discuss some of Drupal's accessibility options here, or stuff that's in core that might make your life easier. First, I would like to talk about images, and then hiding content, announcement for Screenreader users, and keyword accessibility. So if we are placing an image, there are 3 scenarios according to the HTML spec. And I always say, if in doubt, check the spec. The first scenario is an image needs a text alternative because it has meaning, right? You have decided as a content maker that you place an image there, and the image is conveying something. It's adding something to your content. And if you wouldn't see the image, you would miss something. So then we say it has meaning and it should be described. So you can add alternative text. And in HTML, there's the alt attribute. If an image is decorative, so it's nice, it looks nice, it's relevant for what you're doing, but if you won't see it, you're not missing much, or missing anything, I would say. We could say it's decorative, and then you leave the alt attribute empty, which means a value of double quotes. So you you add an alt attribute, but it's empty. So you're explicitly stating this image is decorative. The third option, which is in the specification, but in practice it's not really important, is I have an image with meaning, but I have no idea what it means. And then you don't place an alt at all. So you don't add the attribute. And what will happen then is depending on Screenreader and browser, but usually it will be presented as just the file name or an image or something like that. But I cannot really imagine that you are placing an image that clearly has meaning, but you have no idea what it means. So I just want to state that it's in the specification, but I never have seen a good reason to do that. However, the text alternative or the alt is usually context specific. So if I have an image, I can use it on multiple places. But that doesn't mean that the same text alternative would make sense everywhere, right? So now we have a problem because we have in Drupal a nice feature called the media library, which is great because I can centrally store all my images and I can reuse the images. However, that also means that everything that is connected to that image is by default is shared across all those images. So by default, if I add an image field, the alternative text is required in Drupal. That's the default setting. You can change that, but that's the default. So if I enter a text alternative and I use that image in a totally different place where the text wouldn't make any sense, I would get the same text everywhere by default. For example, if you would have an article about this talk, and there would be an image of my dog there under the piano, you might say, oh, that is Bram's dog is sleeping under the piano, right? If you would just have a more general article about disabilities and you need a picture of a guide dog, then you won't say that it's Bram's dog because that wouldn't make any sense if it's not about me, right? Nobody would know who it is. So then you need a different text alternative, and currently in Drupal core, as far as I see, that's not as easy as it should be. And fortunately, there are many issues open about this. That's the great news, right? So people are thinking about this and are aware that this is a complicated problem. And I think it is because you don't want to lose your centralized image and media storage, but you probably want to edit your text alternatives. I must say, if you are placing your image in the default CK editor, you can override the alt. You cannot leave it empty, so you cannot make it decorative for now, but you can override it. At least that's in CK editor 4. I'm not aware what CK editor 5 is doing yet. But if you have, say, an image field, you cannot do that if you just place the field. So if it's decorative, you should allow an empty alt. However, if it's decorative sometimes, but not everywhere where this image might be used, you have a problem because you want people to enter the text alternative, but you want in some places you don't want it to be displayed. And then the only way to get around this, as far as I know, in Drupal, is to handle this in the theme layer. So you can force in your theme that you just render this image, but you explicitly add an empty alt attribute. So that's something you have to be aware of as a theme builder and a site builder. Then hiding content. Well, why would you like to hide content? Multiple reasons. You might want to hide content because it should be present, but it's only visible if you expand something like a menu or like an accordion kind of fold-out element. Or you might want to include content only for Screenreader users to give them information about visual clues that they otherwise wouldn't get. But for people who can get the visual clues, the content would be redundant. Or you just might want to show something only when it gets focus. So when you use the keyboard to go to it. And a prime example of that are what's called skip links, and I will demo skip links later on in this presentation. But there are valid use cases to only show stuff when it's focused with the keyboard, and otherwise not. So Drupal includes styles for this by default. It's called hidden and visually hidden, and that's also an option you can select if you for field labels. If you select visually hidden, it will be rendered for Screenreader users. The only thing is that it usually by default will be rendered as just a div element, so it will not have any structural information. Usually it might be a good idea to look at the output and decide if you want to use something else. Maybe a heading would be appropriate, maybe a list, or maybe something else. But by default you will get the div with the field name in it. If you select hidden, it will also be hidden from Screenreader users, and there are also standard styles available for only displaying stuff when it gets focused. Then, talking about Screenreader users, if visual stuff happens, that's really like visually obvious, you can add alerts for Screenreader users so they also know that something has happened. So that's more about changes in the presentation, in the content, or it might be a warning message that you're displaying and you really want to ensure that people get it. So if you have a very clear red large warning message, but it has no no attributes to announcing to screen readers, you might miss it because a screen reader is not able, or probably would be able to if you built it, but currently is not looking at visual information to guess what might be important. So if you don't explicitly alert people to things, they will probably miss it. Drupal has a built-in function to do this called Drupal.announce. You can call it from your JavaScript. And what that does is put the text you send to the function in a so-called live region, and the live region will be read by default when a screen reader is active. If you have content that is visible, like the warning message I said, you can give the warning message itself the right attributes. For example, roles alert to say, hey, this is an alert, please read it as soon as possible. And even Drupal is doing that depending on the admin theme you're using, or your main theme is doing that by default for the warnings and error messages that Drupal generates. So that's great. Then keyword accessibility, as I said in the introduction, keyword accessibility is really important for many users, even if they are using a keyboard or something that simulates a keyboard. So you should always ensure that if you're going through your website using the keyboard, just press the tab key to go forward and shift plus tab to go backward. You should always ensure that that your focus is visible, that you can see where you are when using the keyboard. It's also a very easy thing to try. You don't need any extra software for this. You don't need any things you already you not already have. At least I suspect everyone has a keyboard lying around somewhere. And try to use your own CMS with the keyboard and your own site with the keyboard, and just get a feel for how that is. And to be clear, keyboard navigation can be quite cumbersome because you just go forward one element and go back one element, tab, shift, tab. For screen reader users, so me, we are in that regard we are pretty lucky because a screen reader has many more shortcuts and possibilities to navigate easily, and I will demo that soon. But keyword access is very important. Then I would like to do a little demo, screen reader demo, and after that we can do some questions. Let me go to the Drupal website, and I think I have to make it full screen again. Yep. I will activate what's called a speech viewer. Speech viewer gives us a an overlay window that shows the output that I hear in my Bluetooth ear. And I also would switch it to speakers, and I will put this microphone on. There we go. Yeah. Now I will take some distance, otherwise we would hear me twice. This is my normal speech output. Let's see. Let me read the website. I don't think you would be able to make that out. I hope not. Otherwise, you would have some kind of really good ability without practice. So let's slow it down a bit. Rate 0. Link navigation landmark list with 10 items. Link Drupal.org home. Collapsed link Y Drupal. Collapsed link build. Collapsed link solutions. Collapsed link services. So that's more understandable, I guess. By the way, this voice is not of very high quality. There are better voices, but I like this one because it's fast. Its response time is fast, and it's well, understandable enough for my use. So if we would like to navigate this, I could do the keyboard navigation thing I talked about. So I could just press tab key. And here you see the skip links I mentioned. Skip the main content link. Skip links bring you to parts of the website that are otherwise not that quickly accessible. For example, if I would like to go to the search field, I would have to navigation landmark list Drupal list for developers for marketers link through for agency case studies link this navigation Drupal 9 link in the news link build link list download and browse repository documentation browse modules link themes link distribution etc. Skip to search link. If I would use the skip link, navigation landmark search edit search blank, I would land immediately on the search fields. So that could save you a lot of time if you have no other way of navigation. As I said, as a Screenreader user, I'm quite lucky because I have lots of hotkeys to navigate. For example, I could use the H for header to go through this page. Main landmark, we stand with Ukraine flag, Ukraine heading level 2. DrupalCon 2022 is back in person, heading level 2. Drupal for developers link heading level 2. Drupal for marketers link heading level 2. And these are all the headings on this page, so I could easily go to a heading and start reading from there. I could also create a list of certain elements. Elements list dialog. So such as headings. Type, review, Drupal for market, Drupal for support, industry, AI feature 9. And by entering on one of those headings, I would quickly go to it. Also, links. So I could quickly scan the website for certain links. On this page, there's a very interesting thing going on. If I go to see Drupal in the real world, and scroll down, this is a very weird link text. And why is that? Because there's an image in the link, and the image has been given a text alternative. The text alternative is open YMCA on a computer screen, but that's if you put an image in your link and you give it a text alternative, it will become part of the link. This is one of the cases where I would say if you know that you use this image in many places, the text alternative open YMCA on a computer screen is good, right? It describes what you see. You could use it in your content, but now it's used in a link, and then you get a real weird link text. Open link on a computer screen graphic open Y Drupal distribution for a link. That will become the whole link text, and even if I would open up the let me do it again. Drupal open source CMS Drupal. the link list, you would also see the whole image text alternative and the link text in this list. So that's getting confusing pretty fast.
Enable the microphone. Just I'm gonna enable the microphone.
Oh yes. Okay. Oh, it was already enabled, I guess. No, now it's disabled, right? Now it's disabled. Okay.
Right, sorry.
There it is.
Link open Y. Drupal distribution for Inca.
And you could also read in the speech viewer what's going on. But so that's what's happening if you put an image in a link and it has text alternative. Let me check the time real quick. Yeah. So what I wanted to demo also was, of course, the CMS side of Drupal. So I spun up a local development environment, and of course, I got the option to use demo content, so I did because I was too lazy to enter everything myself. And what you see here is the almost standard installation with the demo content. I could go through this, but because I'm not logged in this browser, that's not so smart of me. Let me log in real quick. Login.
Loading tool off given. Loading password edit protect username. Password. Loading page. Loading complete.
This thing only runs on localhost, so don't try to log in with admin yourself. It won't work. I hope. And if it does, please make some great content here. Anyway, now I'm logged in, and what I can do is I can go through the administration toolbar here.
Administration menu navigation landmark list with 8 items, content link, find and manage
And you hear a lot of output there. It says navigation landmark because it's a navigation area, and it has a name of administration toolbar and content link. What's nice is that I could also go to
administration menu closed.
To manage, and now it says tray administration menu closed, and that's one of the alert functions I described earlier. But now when I go to
administration,
go to edit.
Press tabbing is constrained to a set of 14 contextual links and the edit mode toggle. Press the S key to end.
Well, that's a lot of help information there, but it says that the tabbing is restricted. So for keyboard users, it means that we only now have an interface for the contextual management buttons, the edit buttons, and I can go back to this edit button to disable it again. So when I press tab now,
navigation landmark, search landmark, open search configure user account menu navigation landmark, open user account, open
I only go through this configuration buttons, and when I press escape,
tabbing is no longer constrained by the contextual module.
I also get nice output that it's no longer constrained, and when I press tab now, it will go through the whole website again.
Home link, main navig list, home article link.
So for content editors who are working with these in-page interfaces and are willing to and are willing to do it by keyboard, you can really quickly go where you need to be without tabbing through your whole website. And I think that's a great feature, and that clearly shows that that there are many people in Drupal core who not just read WCAG and ATAG and say, oh, we do the checks and yeah, it's fine. But they also really have thought about this user experience. I think that's great. Also, let me show you one example of hiding things. In this case, when I go to the recipes on the homepage, let me go to the homepage. Just a second.
Loading complete. Tray administration. No neck site administration tool administration list with link and landmark search landmark navigation applicable navigation click main landmark.
Just scrolling here.
Level 2 deep Mediterranean quiche.
Well, it's a nice heading, right? It's an article. And here we have an image. That's a good description, I guess, of this image. Fortunately, we all had lunch, so we are not hungry, so we can stand this, right? But above this image, you will see in the Screenreader output the text image. Why is that? That's because this field label, the field is called image, and the field label has been visually hidden, but it's still visible for Screenreader users. And in this case, I don't think it adds much, because you know that it's an image because it says so, right? It's it's made up as an image, so the Screenreader will announce it as an image, even without this image text above it. So usually, I would say make this kind of things really, if you hide them, make them really hidden and not just visually hidden. And well, this is the only thing that I searched for an issue on Drupal.org and didn't find one, so I opened one last week, as you have to do in a good open source project, right? But overall, I will say that I'm really impressed with the Drupal community and their accessibility efforts. And I'm trying to get back to my slides here. Just a second. And that brings me to my conclusions. What I was saying, Drupal, I think, has a lot of... Even the wind can get it away, right? There we go. It should be gone, right? Yeah, thanks. So Drupal clearly has a lot of accessibility knowledge in the community, and I'm really amazed about the quality of issues I've seen, the quality of contributions, the quality of what's currently in core, and I'm really grateful for that. For example, a few years ago, I worked on a large Drupal site as an accessibility consultant and tester, and when I was not advising developers, or was not working with developers to plan new features and how we should make them accessible, I would just go through the system, test stuff that we already had made, see if everything was still fine. And if the CMS experience wouldn't have been accessible, I clearly wouldn't have been able to do that job properly. So, and there are much more examples of that. For example, as I said, content editors and content authors who want to use Drupal and have a disability or need accessible systems. So that's for me. It's really great to see that the community is so active on this accessibility, and also has the people who really say, okay, we have an accessibility. Let's check the guidelines. What does they say? Are we compliant with that? Is it okay? And the feature I just show you, for example, the keyboard tabbing constraints, that's something that I wouldn't recommend any developer implement that doesn't know already something about accessibility, because it's very easy to mess up keyboard focus and keyboard tab ordering. But in this case, I think it's a really great implementation, and it's clearly well thought out. So again, many knowledge in the community there. Everything in Drupal core, you may think everything in Drupal core is accessible. From what I've seen so far, that's true. So if you're just using core, you have an accessible CMS out of the box, and that's a great thing to have. But if you are going to extend your CMS, add all kinds of fancy features, you might probably make it more inaccessible. And of course, that's usually not your intention. So with some care, you can really make great accessible content editing experiences in Drupal. So it's question time. I hope you learned something from my talk already. I'm already glad if you just consider accessibility in your next project. So yeah, are there any questions?
You can raise your hand. I will see you.
Yes.
Any questions? Oh,
I don't bite.
If I wanted to test my website with a screen reader, I checked the different alternatives, and I saw that on Linux it was Orca, but it wasn't used that much because it wasn't good enough. Is that the case? Should I try it with Orca or not? What are my possibilities there?
Good question. Well, of course, it's again the year for Linux on the desktop, right? So I think
Every year.
Orca will be mainstream soon. No, I'm just kidding. Orca is pretty good screen reader, but because it's not used that often, of not used that much relative to like Windows and Mac systems, it also has much less manpower behind it. So it's yeah, it might lack some things, but overall it's quite a good screen reader. And what's really important these days is that it's a combination, and I could do another hour-long talk about that, but it's a combination between browsers and screen readers, right? So your browser has an accessible interface that's communicating through the screen reader. It's also depends on which browser you use. From the top of my head, Orca these days works fine with Firefox, and also I think with Chrome-based stuff now. So it's really the combination you're testing. If you want to just see how a screen reader, what data goes into the screen reader, so what the screen reader is getting from your browser, there are also these days really cool tools for that. In Chrome's inspector, there's an accessibility tab, and Firefox had for longer now, for much more versions. And in Firefox, if you check the accessibility tab, you will see the whole tree of accessibility information that's being sent to your screen reader. So that's also a nice way to check what's going on if you want to see if your structure is coming is getting passed on correctly. I hope that answered your question. But yeah, to get back to your question, Orca can certainly be used for testing. Yeah.
Okay, we have one more question here.
And so there is this common sentence that I'm hearing quite often, that improving accessibility of the site is also good for SEO of the site.
Yeah.
In your career of auditing the sites for the accessibility efforts, do you also see as a result of that the SEO is in fact improved?
Yeah. I usually when we do audits, that are not our own websites, right? So that's just for a customer, and I usually don't have access to all their analytics. But usually, if a website is well structured, your SEO will improve because it's easier for automated systems to get data out of your website. So if your heading structure is correct, for example, it will ease extracting content. And if your images have nice text alternatives and people search for that text, they can get a match. So that's a free SEO bonus, I would say. It has not come so far yet that search engines do ranking based on accessibility. That would be cool because that would help a lot. But I think that if you have difficulty, say, selling the point of accessibility, that's improving SEO is a nice side effect, right? And I think there is enough evidence that it's related. Yeah.
Oh, last question.
Already, I
Hi, Bram.
talked too long. Yeah.
I saw you navigating the homepage of Drupal.org, and then you notice that it's full of these little bits and pieces. And we put all our homepages full of bits and pieces.
That's where they're for.
Our carousels, our heroes, our upcoming events, all that kind of things. As a disabled person, do you even bother visiting a homepage, or do you skip immediately to something more?
I'm kind of old school. I still sometimes access a website by URL and not by search engine, so that will get me to the homepage. So yeah, I go to the homepage because usually, depending on how it's structured, it has a lot of relevant recent content. For example, if you want to say check news or whatever, there's a good bet that you will find it on the homepage. And usually, when you know what you're looking for, you either check if it's on the homepage or just look at the navigation and see where it would be in the navigation, where it would fit in, and go through there. But these days, because and I couldn't really show everything about that because that would take hours and hours. But if you know, and that's also not a given. If you know all the functionality of your screen reader, if you say kind of a power user, you have so many options to quickly jump through content. For example, on the Drupal homepage, I would have been able to go from article to article. I would have been able to go from heading to heading, or I would even, if I know I was looking for, say, the search field or another form field, I have shortcuts to immediately jump to edit fields, buttons, form fields in general, whatever. So if you know what you're looking for, you can easily navigate around. For example, if I would was looking for numbers and I would guess they are in the table, I have even shortcuts to go to the next and previous table. So if you're a bit focused on looking for something specific, you could definitely start on the homepage. But sometimes you don't have a real goal in mind. For example, last week I was updating this talk because it has been first proposed in 2019, and I just was curious, where's Drupal right now? And then the homepage is great because it gives you, all the relevant entries to these are our Drupal selling points for marketing teams. These are our Drupal selling points for, regarding accessibility, and these are the Drupal selling points for developers. And Drupal, we are online, and Drupal 10 is coming, and so then the homepage is exactly what you want. So yeah, I still go there. Yeah.
So give him a warm and loud applause. And thank you, Bram.
Thank you very much.
I heard that Bram, but maybe Bram, you can confirm, can still give a little bit of accessibility advice in the sprint rooms,
Sure.
if needed or if wanted.
Yeah.
So please go and talk to Bram.
I'll hang around here for a while, so if you have any interest,
maybe the
in,
CK editor thing, maybe something else.
Yes.
All right. And then we
Cool.
quickly have to prepare for the next session. Thank you all.
Thank you.